Okay. So we have a set of 4 speakers. We're going to have 1 speaker who's going to be coming in online, and then 3 speakers in person. And what we're going to be talking today is basically career paths and career journeys. So we have 4 wonderful people: Helen Parkinson, who's the head of knowledge management at EMBL-EBI, Lamar, who is working for OC Robotics, Sarah Gibson from 2I2C, and Marion Weinzierl from ARC in Durham. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting them to introduce themselves. So I'm not going to try and introduce their really storied and varied careers. They're going to spend 10 minutes each introducing themselves, introducing a little bit about their career paths, their journeys, and then we're going to have a Q&A with them as a panel. Because we're doing this as hybrid, what we're going to be doing is putting all of the questions into Slido. So I believe I have a link that's up here. If you want to ask them a question, please just use this event code on Slido, scan the QR code, and then what we'll do is we'll see all of the questions come up. And then in the Q&A, we will go through some of the questions that you have. So I will leave you a few seconds to get that QR code before we turn over to our first speaker. So I'm just watching everyone. This is kind of like being at a concert with everyone putting up their phones. Are we good? I think I'm no longer seeing as many phones up, and yes, it's going to be shared in the Slack as well. Okay, so Helen, are you there and online?
Good morning. I am online, but I can't share my screen yet.
Okay, we will fix this for you.
I think you're sharing. Good morning, Neil.
I need to unshare.
Thank you for inviting me as well. I'm really excited to be here. Okay, looks good. Let's try the slides. Can you see? Yes, you can. Okay, that's good. All right, so thank you for inviting me. I'm a bioinformatician, and I'm going to talk about my career path in bioinformatics. And I have this very grand title of knowledge management section head, but that really just means I manage projects. So I've got a little graphic here of my career path. So I'm a geneticist by training. My first degree is in biochemistry and genetics. My PhD is in genetics, but actually that very quickly turned into data analysis and building databases, and building really primitive, ugly databases to do data analysis for circadian rhythms in flies. And people went on to get Nobel Prizes for this, and our data was not in no way involved, but I'm really pleased to see that area of circadian rhythms is still of interest. I then went on to work at the EBI. So we do very large data production. We do building databases. We do community engagement. And my role was really as a curator and annotator, firstly for nucleotide sequence data, so DNA, and then for gene expression data. And I discovered really quickly that the skill set I had was really useful, but unless we could automate things, so script, build better applications, try and figure out how to do things quickly, that we couldn't really serve the users. And I kind of became a product owner. And in some ways, I'm still a product owner. Some of the things I went on to do after that were data modeling and ontology development. And I did a lot of collaboration with Robert Stevens' group at the University of Manchester, where I rocked up and said, this is really funny because this application doesn't do any of the things I needed to do. And he said, well, that's because it's a research problem in computer science. And that's when I got really interested at working at the interface of other disciplines. And as a geneticist, coming in to talk to computer scientists was really hard initially. There was like no common ground, and we had to kind of try and find a common understanding. And that was really interesting. So now I build data resources like the Genome-Wide Dissociation Studies catalog, like the Polygenic Score catalog. We build lots of other things, and we do a lot of data analysis. But one of my key jobs now is I'm a manager of people and also projects. I really enjoy the community engagement parts, understanding what other disciplines do and why they do it. And that working at the interface has been one of the fun things for me. And I have some responsibility for strategy, sustainability, and funding, which is why I really care about the work of the SSI. So this is my last slide. So you asked some questions and I've attempted to answer them. So what's worked? What worked is that I like working at the interface of disciplines. Working at the interface of disciplines is exciting and it opens up new worlds, and it means you can kind of build a career path learning from others with different skills. Uncommonly in science, I'm not a specialist. I'm not a specialist in any one thing, but I'm a generalist. I know about lots of different kinds of data. I know about lots of different kinds of software, and I'm always thinking about users and the kind of users that we serve. One of the things that's really worked for me is building a good network, so a network of colleagues, but also being kind of open. And I've put that under the learning piece, so that openness and curiosity for what other people are doing and why they do it, I think has been really a driver for me in my career path, and embracing the user needs, because we're building product and things have to be persisted over time. Trying to figure out how to do that has been a really important learning piece. There have been many failures. We have built lots of things that didn't work. Some of our early websites are comical now when you go back and look at them, but actually things have got better over time. And one of the things that I learned was that if you try and over model your data and your tools, you kind of mitigate against sustainability and generalizability. And things change faster, particularly in the branch of science that I work in, which is very molecular biology driven. They change faster than you can build tools with them. So if you've over modeled your tools, then your tools will not persist. When things didn't work, it was always about managing people and change. All of the huge mistakes I've been made have been about people. None of it's ever been about software or data or projects. And the thing that I learned through coaching was that when I understand my own value set and I'm true to those values, that's when I'm happiest in my work. And part of that is about being open and curious to what's happening in other domains. And I guess the thing that I learned most clearly was knowing when to say no and what to say no to. And so things which were iterative of previous things, or things which were, we couldn't see any user benefit. Users couldn't use it, or we were doing it because we were interested and not because we thought the users would be interested. So that's when I said no. And advice to my past self, don't worry so much. It's, this isn't clinical medicine, nobody will die. Bad software can kill people, but bad software also can be repaired. Ask for help. So one of the joys at working in the multidisciplinary space and at the interface is nobody expects you to know everything. So you can advertise your ignorance and you can ask questions, seek out challenging experiences. And I think it's really hard to find a career path in this space, because quite often we're generalists, we work on different kinds of software, we work on different kinds of data, but actually there is a career path there, but you need the kind of network and you need the challenge and the curiosity for new data to find it. And I just wanted to finish by saying, my cursor in the right place, what I do is the function of the team, right? So this is my team, and this is a team I've just taken over. And these guys are the people who actually do the work. And so we're sustaining these products with these people. And the fabulous thing about these people is they come from many countries, they have very different experiences, and they themselves are bringing their experience from kind of multidisciplinary scenarios. Hopefully I'm within the time frame, and I'll stop there. And thank you for the opportunity to speak to this group.
Thank you very much, Helen. I'm going to get Lamar up next. Do you want to come along here and I'll start sharing your slides as well? Do you want to use a clicker or I can just use that? Yeah.
All yours. Thanks. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, morning everyone. I hope you had a nice bank holiday weekend. And yeah, my talk's called an RC sandwich. Just a warning, I'm gonna go with the sandwich theme throughout the entire talk, so just bear with me. Yeah. Okay, so why do I call it an RC sandwich? I started in industry, and then I moved into the research sector, and then now I'm back in industry again. So spent quite a few years doing research software, but yeah, not the whole time. So just briefly, that's my education flashed up there. It's a bit of a mixed bag, but the common theme that's kind of glued the entire thing together has been software development. And I'm sure a lot of you can identify with this. You know, it was the part that I really enjoyed doing and the thing I wanted to build a career around. So that's pretty much what I did. And just a brief timeline, I started at a company called Full Tech Limited in 2011. I moved to UK Research and Innovation, spent about 7 years there. And then most recently, I moved to GE Aerospace, or OC Robotics, as it was called at the time I started. And yeah, that's where I am now. So the first part of the sandwich, I worked at a company called Full Tech Limited. I was a software developer straight out of university. And it was a really good role because they funded my PhD, which was great. I didn't have to pay for it myself. Yeah, I got some basic exposure to project management. Yeah, they funded kind of training in that as well. And obviously I developed my research skills and so on. I didn't get to develop my technical skills very much, right? So when you're in a production environment where there's lots of pressure to deliver to customers, you tend to kind of sacrifice your personal development. At least that's what I found happened, not just for me, but my colleagues as well. And I kind of felt like I was stagnant and coasting a little bit. The work was interesting, but it wasn't really, I didn't feel within myself like I was developing. So I felt like I needed to do something else. And that's when I joined the STFC as a scientific software engineer. And that was really good because I got to leverage my understanding of research from when I did my PhD working in a research group. But then I also got to deepen my technical understanding because I was in a big team, had a lot of support from other developers. And it really just gave me the space to deepen my technical knowledge, you know, working on using the tools that we were using for development. Mainly there it was developing software for data reduction. So all the data that came off the instruments, we reduced the data, did some data analysis and so on. And yeah, it was just really interesting work. But again, it started to feel a little bit comfortable. So then I went up for promotion, became a senior software engineer. That was great because I had a lot more technical responsibility. There was more customer focus. I'll use the word customer a lot because now I'm industrial again. But yeah, the scientists, you know, working with them closely, trying to understand, you know, what their requirements are for the data analysis. I broadened my understanding of management and the scope of management. I was leading more junior developers, and that was really interesting working with people. And then, you know, spend a lot of time leading the agile development process. So the way it was set up there, it was very professional. So ISIS actually made a really good policy decision early on to professionalize the software development and not just have individual scientists at individual beamlines developing software. So we needed, you know, to harmonize things and get like a central platform that was well developed. And I would say that that was successful. It wasn't perfect, but it was just a really nice space to develop a career. So again, things started to feel a little bit familiar, comfortable, felt like I started to coast a little bit, needed a challenge. So then I took a bit of a leap of faith and I applied for this group leader role. And I should start by saying I wasn't successful at first, right? So when you're progressing through your career, you've got to be comfortable with taking disappointment, right? Dealing with disappointment and using the feedback and understanding what it is you need to develop to be able to reach the level that you want to reach. And that's what I did. Funnily enough, the person that they offered to didn't take the job, so I was able to get it, and you know, did a lot of L&D, focused a lot of work on L&D and on stuff like leadership, you know, managing, you know, improvements in processes. So I did some training on lean and continuous integration, and then I was able to broaden my skill set, you know, managing customer relationships. So speaking to science group leaders, trying to understand, you know, what's the strategy for their software moving forward instead of just, you know, just the here and now and the productionized development. You know, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve, you know, forward planning and that kind of stuff. And then also influencing. So we were really good at software development, I felt. You know, we were very professionalized in the way we were doing things, but that wasn't the same across our partner facilities or any of the infrastructure facilities we depended on. So then, you know, I started getting involved in different steering committees, trying to influence how they develop the software and so on. And that was really good because it felt like I was just broadening my skill set the whole time. But then I got into this mindset where I felt like, okay, so I've got all these skills. I'm in this domain, but can I actually use this somewhere else? You know, are my skills marketable outside of the work that I'm doing right now? So I wanted to challenge myself to maybe lead a department, lead a critical business function in a company, maybe shift a greater commercial focus. And that's when I applied for the role of head of software at OC Robotics. And yeah, as I said, there was a massive shift to commercial focus, which is very, very different. A lot of the kind of blockers are out of the way, right? So the bureaucracy kind of, you know, disappeared in some ways, just because there's a much better understanding of engineering as a discipline when you're in a production environment than perhaps when you're in a research environment. So that was really good. I started making a lot of, you know, still doing it, a lot of enterprise level design decisions and architecture decisions, which I didn't before. And that was, you know, exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure, because, you know, you're responsible for a lot of stuff. And then, of course, I got to work with robots, which was a long time passion of mine, and it's really fun. I do kind of miss the research environment, but I have to say that the robotic stuff is pretty exciting. So what are the takeaways? What's the advice? So I paid a lot of attention to my L&D later on in my career, and I would say that's something that you really should do. There's always a temptation to say you don't have time, right? But you know, you're constantly learning, right? So the way that I shifted my focus was more on my skill sets and less on the technologies or tools that I want to use, right? Then I said yes to a lot of things, but I didn't say yes to everything. So I had to be strategic about that, you know, saying yes to the things that I felt would allow me to develop in the direction that I wanted to and build the skills that I wanted to build, right? So sometimes you don't have a clear picture of where you want to go with your career, but you know the things that you enjoy and the things that excite you, so you can just move along that axis. Interdependence is key, right? I've got one of the didn't work things is analysis paralysis. I don't know if anyone else can identify with that, but you feel like you need to be the fountain of all knowledge, right? You need to know everything. You need to know all the details to be effective, and you don't. You just need to understand the people who've got the knowledge and how to leverage that knowledge and how to work with those people, right? So it's important that you focus on building relationships with people, because it'll really pay off. Especially when it comes to a management context. You know, being able to build relationships with people is important, or else you can't lead them, right? And yeah, I manage my own growth, right? So you don't wait around for someone else to notice that you're doing a good job or you should be promoted or anything like that. You know, you've got to upwardly manage and take control of that yourself and shout about it, advertise yourself, all these things. You know, and it, you know, you will reap the benefits. One of the things that didn't work for me, as I said, the first job, I stayed in my comfort zone for about 4 years and I didn't really progress. And that was, you know, a bit frustrating, but that was pretty much up, you know, down to me, I should say. So, you know, you might not want to just always take a massive jump and make yourself really uncomfortable. But if you do it incrementally and just take on a new thing every time, then, you know, you'll be able to look back in 6 months, a year, 5 years or whatever, and see that you've actually made quite a lot of progress. As I said earlier, don't wait for the acknowledgement, you know, do it. You've got to do it. And then one important thing was knowing when to move on, right? Sometimes you might be stuck, you might be stagnant, you might be frustrated, you know. Sometimes moving on is the best thing to do for your mental health. And it doesn't mean that you need to leave the type of job that you love. It just means that you might need to change your environment, right? And you know, it really, speaking from personal experience, you know, it's really good to know when to move on. So that was pretty much all I wanted to say. Thanks for listening. If you've got any questions, I'll be around for the next couple of days. So just, you know, grab me. Always happy to talk. My badge is green, so you can get close if you want to. Yeah. And yeah, look forward to networking with you and hopefully possibly working with some of you, because we've got vacancies. I know this is a bit cheeky, but it's in several areas. So, you know, like the full spectrum of seniority. We've got junior roles, senior roles. We've got roles in AI. We've got roles in web front-end development, platform development, embedded software. So if you're interested and you're looking, you know, just drop me a line or come grab me and I'd be happy to discuss further. But thanks for your time and thanks for the invitation.
Thank you so much, Lamar. Sarah, would you like to come up?
Hi everybody, my name's Sarah Gibson, and I'm really pleased to be back in this space with y'all again. I've only managed to have like a one in-person CW before, so it's really cool to be back here and seeing you all again. So yeah, my career so far. So I started off as an astrophysicist. I was working on gamma ray bursts and did my PhD at the University of Leicester. And this is where I started to build my own software, really. I'd done my integrated masters before this, and I'd left that being like, I don't want to code, which is kind of hilarious given where I am now. But I kind of like bit the bullet, and I started learning Python during my PhD. And yeah, that code I wrote was not in any way reproducible, reusable, sustainable, or good. But I learned a lot. And the end of my PhD, I decided I never wanted to write a paper again. So I started looking on the job market, and I have a friend in Leicester who I owe many beers to, who forwarded me a job application for research engineering, data science, and software engineering at the Alan Turing Institute, because, well, I knew I didn't want to do research again, like the traditional research that I'd been trained in. I also didn't want to be in a company only caring about some CEO's bottom line. And I was introduced to this research software engineering career path that I know has been pioneered by people in this room, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. But I was incredibly green because I'd done so much self-learning in an unstructured way during my PhD. I actually remember on my first day at the Turing, Martin asking me, what's your GitHub handle so I can add you to the team? And I'm like, what's GitHub? So had to bring myself up to a lot of speed on that, on engineering principles and working as part of a team and working collaboratively and everything about that. And I also joined as a data scientist, because when you're an astrophysicist or even just a physicist, kind of like leaving the career, the thing you get told is that you're a data scientist. But again, I had another very great opportunity, which was I was able to do both data science and software engineering projects at the Turing. And what I learned that for me, software engineering is way more fun than data science. So I was able to grow and learn about what I enjoyed doing through all of that. One of the first projects I was put on at the Turing Institute was the Turing Way, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. At the time, it was a guide to reproducible research. I'm sure if any of you look it up now, you'll see it's become much more of that. And I thought, that's great. This project is going to teach me everything I need to know to be good at the new job that I just got. And Kirsty Whitaker, who's the co-PI, went, yes, but no, I would like you to go and hang out with Binder folks and figure out cloud computing. And so for a person who did not even know what Git was, it was now learn Kubernetes and Docker. And so that was like a 6-month fun ride on that. And it was also an introduction to Project Jupyter and the Jupyter Hub team, and radically working in open source and having to make very public statements about what should and shouldn't be in software. But from that, I learned all about how to share reproducible computational environments to kind of smooth the pathway to collaborative, open scientific research. And I ended up running a lot of workshops to kind of train people up on Binder and describing their computational environments. And then what happened was a lot of the Jupyter Hub team got together and created a nonprofit startup, because what we see is that the Jupyter Hub software is a critical piece of infrastructure to doing open research in a collaborative way. But as I know from having to learn Kubernetes, it's really, really hard to deploy and manage it. And so this nonprofit startup came into existence, of where we are providing a managed Jupyter Hub cloud-based service for research and education. But we're kind of experimenting in doing it in a completely transparent, open source to a point where we're trying to train people in Jupyter-based workflows for doing their research and education in the cloud, and we are doing it all upstream open source. So this was very much like, this was the place I needed to be, really. This was combining all of my loves for open source and the team I was already a part of there. So I'm going to add a little caveat onto this, which is that, if you'll skip, yeah. I think it's very human for us when, whenever we're asked to give a presentation on our career timelines, that we do it in chronological order. And this gives the illusion that there is a plan. So if you were sat in this audience, whether in this room or online, and you're thinking, God, these people are like on it. The plan is, at least in my case, I wouldn't speak for my other panelists, but in my case, the plan is a lie. And I just, that's my advice to you, is if this is slightly anxiety, like, oh my God, I need to know what I want and what I need to do, is like, no, not really. And like, we didn't. So what did work for me? What did actually make it look like this was all planned? And there's two big things here. Oh, I skipped one. So first of all is mentorship. I believe everybody can benefit from mentorship at all points in your life. But like the type of mentorship and what you're being mentored on can change. And I also believe in the many mentors theory, because mentors are people too. They are not going to know all of the skills that you want to know, and they are also flawed. And unicorns just aren't real. There isn't a person who knows how to do everything. So you need to surround yourself with a collection of people that can help you get to where you need to be. And then the other thing that I think is really beneficial is cultures of learning and blamelessness. So the blameless culture isn't a new thing. I am technically what we call site reliability engineering now, and the idea of postmortems and retrospectives go a lot into blameless culture. And like, I heard Google published a book about it, but the idea that you blame a process, not the person, and then combine this with a culture of learning, which was one of the things that the Turing helped me a lot with as well, that actually you don't need to know all the skills to complete a project. It's fine if you're picking them up along the way. I think that really helps people grow and find what they're comfortable with, what they're interested in, where they might want to go next. So I know these are not necessarily things that you as individuals can do. Well, you can go out and find your mentors, but if you are in a position to be building teams, really think about the culture you are investing, because it will benefit the individuals in those teams as well. So what didn't work so much? At the minute, I am branching out into a community and strategic role, and like, that's different from someone who's been incredibly technical and code-based so far. It feels like a jacket that doesn't quite fit yet, and it taps into like a lot of unhelpful mental stuff that it takes more energy to keep a healthy mindset. So at the minute, I'm undecided if that pans out into like a long-term thing or not, or if it was a thing we tried once. But either way, that's not a failure, because hey, I just learned something about myself. Maybe strategy is not in my future, but I wouldn't have known that without trying. So overcoming challenges, I think the biggest one is imposter syndrome. And this comes back to the mentorship I mentioned earlier. How this manifested for me was that I surrounded myself with enough people telling me I could do things that eventually they didn't need to tell me out loud, because I could already hear them in my head. So it became much more of a feel the fear and do it anyway kind of feeling. But you need that support network to get you up to that point, I think, and just persevering whilst being embedded in that learning culture, that blamelessness culture. Advice, the first job search out of your PhD is the worst. It is truly awful. You are untested. You have no idea what you want, and you're just like, please, somebody pay me. But from then on, you're much more in control, right? You're not staring down you're probably less likely to be staring down the end of like payment schedules and people telling you that if you leave academia it's a failure. Like, that just doesn't happen. You're a bit more in control of where you move, how you move, when you move. And also just that you'll get there, and that I don't actually think that I could be here today without going through all of that. And yeah, I just needed to do it to get to this version of myself. But I will add the caveat that Sarah at the time would be rolling her eyes so hard right now. But yeah, and then this is like a really meta quote at the bottom here, which is actually, I gave a careers talk to a mentorship group in Kenya a few weeks back remotely. And this is actually a piece of feedback one of the attendees gave to me about my talk on careers, which is, it's filled with trial and error and trying new things and sticking with them to find out where we belong. And I think that really encapsulates everything that I'd like you to take away today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Finally, Marion.
Hello, I will talk about my career as a senior RSE, but I will talk a bit less about my CV and a bit more about what I might not put on LinkedIn, and maybe anybody who might want to hire me at a later place, please leave the room and don't listen to this. Given that this is recorded, so I won't go into too deep personal detail, but still, this is my condensed CV, like I would put it on LinkedIn. So I started with a degree in media informatics. I then went on to do a PhD in scientific computing, did a postdoc in Durham in computational solar physics. Then I decided to go to industry for 2 years and was a computational scientist in an X-ray technology startup and rose up to senior. Then I went back to academia as an RSE in advanced research computing at Durham University, also rose up to senior and took on an additional role as RSE theme leader in the N8 Center of Excellence for Computationally Intensive Research. The N8 are the 8 most research intensive universities in the north of England. Yeah, and that's basically in a very compressed form what I did. And as Sarah said, it looks all very intentional and it looks all very planned, but that is not really how things happened. So what I normally do not put on my CV is all the struggle with various fixed-term contracts. So this time as a postdoc was not one contract, that was various fixed-term contracts over a span of about 3 years. Also, the reason that I then ended this postdoc was not that I decided, but I actually wanted to continue this career and continue in academia. But it turned out that the funding depended on various things, amongst those a letter of support from someone in the Met Office, and that letter of support did not come in time, so the funding fell through, so my postdoc contract ended, and then I had to start to apply for various things. I had actually academic applications, so I applied for other postdoc positions. I also applied for an assistant professor position and so on. These all didn't come through. Also, my time in industry did not actually end in a planned way, but I was made redundant. So if somebody, or hopefully most of you are not familiar how this looks like, this is the very polite way of how people tell you that they don't need you any longer. And yeah, actually, it's quite a shock if you walk in to work one day. For me, it was after actually a holiday. I came in the first day back, and my boss immediately asked me into a room and basically told me, "We have made your role redundant. Please pack your things and off you go." So I went back home. Just from my very personal experience, and this might be very different to anyone working in industry and academia. So what I've taken from these various roles in industry and in academia is, in industry, I had the feeling people were much more happy to admit they didn't know something, that you might need to talk to somebody else, whereas in academia, the feeling is always like somebody has to, or you have to know everything and everybody has to know everyone. It's very much about self-promotion and basically making your way there. On the other hand, I felt that I had much more freedom in academia to shape what I'm doing and to take decisions. And it's not that somebody will tell you, oh, actually the board decided this project isn't interesting anymore, or this idea of yours, we won't do that because it doesn't fit into our strategy. Or so you are a bit freer in what you do and making your own decisions. But this also means that you might end up doing too much, and especially if you're in a real academic career, you will have this list of things, of teaching, of publishing, of research, of administration, and so on. The demands just pile up, whereas in industry it might be, or usually from my experience, it's a bit more defined what people want you to do, but it's mostly only this they want you to do and not so much of the blue sky thinking. I felt in industry, I didn't need to explain so much what it is I'm doing and why it actually makes sense I'm doing that, and so which was kind of nice. Yeah, I talked about fixed term contracts. I tell myself in academia, it's actually nice that you do something for the greater good. It's not just about profits and so, and you are actually helping people to do research for a better world or so you hope. But on the other hand, in industry again, I was so happy when I had my first permanent contract there. So I had in academia never had a permanent contract, but it turned out these permanent contracts in industry end up not being that permanent after all, especially if you're just under this 2-year range that you have in the UK before you actually have real employee rights. So I won't talk about that anymore, it's a longer story, but I also had the experience that, especially in the software technology industry, they don't really like it if somebody would like a bit more flexible working or so. So that is probably because there's so much choice of people who don't need flexible working. But yeah, that's what I took from that. Talking about flexible working, I had various ways of how to talk about flexible working in my CV and where to put it. And at the moment, I've come up with this little note next to my career section where I say, actually, these are just the contract times I list in my CV, but there has been quite a lot of part-time working, there has been maternal leave, and I'm happy to tell you, but when I actually listed it somewhere in detail or so, that was not always positive. So I had my first child when I was halfway through my PhD. I did my PhD viva being 7 months pregnant with my second child. So I had various times, so throughout my pregnancies, which weren't easy, and also afterwards, so where I was off. And I had basically, I think this is now my, oh no, I think in these fixed term contracts during postdocs, I had a phase where I actually worked full time. But this job I'm in now at the moment is basically when I am again back fully full time in my work. When I applied for various jobs in industry asking for full time, very many doors were actually closed in my face, and I experimented with already putting it in my motivation letter and asking at various stages throughout application processes or so. And so far, none of this really worked well. So people just seem to not like it if you're asking for flexible working for part-time. And I've talked to other parents who were saying something similar there as well. So having a family and career is really great. So it's really great. I'm really proud. And as you might guess from that, I couldn't just put one photo on this slide from my kids and me. I'm really proud of my 2 girls. It's also at times really hard and frustrating, and you feel constantly guilty. You feel guilty at work. You feel guilty if you're with your children. So you're always guilty that you're not doing the other thing. And I won't go into detail and where it's hard and where it's great or so, because I think that would be another long talk or so. But the way that we basically handle this, and I want to stress that this is not a recipe, and that might not work for someone else, for another family or so, because it's very personal. Every family is different. But we basically made the decision that we want to be together, which means, and I've seen it working differently for other people, but we wanted to be basically during the week in the same home. So we didn't want to be in long commuting distances from work. I have friends who actually live in different countries with children, and it all works for them. But we made the decision early on that we said, okay, we want our family to be together. This has influenced many career decisions. This has, of course, limited many career options. For example, when I applied for various academic positions, I basically only applied in Durham and Newcastle because I didn't want the long commute, and doing it remotely or so wasn't really an option then, and maybe for such a decision, for such a career is not an option now as well. Of course, we are not doing it on our own. It's a big web of arrangements that you do, that you basically, we have a big calendar with different colors, and so having our various dates that we have in there, and one for my husband, one color for me, then for the children, then for family and friends, and then for other appointments. And so just to keep it all on track. So you have to constantly juggle things, and we have not our grandparents are so nearby, so we have what they called during COVID a childcare bubble, so other friends who help out and who we help out with their children. We rely on holiday camps and wraparound care, and having bosses or colleagues who are actually supportive if you suddenly have to walk out of something because school called, or like today, as teachers strike. So my husband currently has our younger daughter with him at work. So you really need a lot of support to juggle it. And also I think, and this is also very important, is we just have been very lucky that things worked out, and that people have been supportive, and that we have 2 healthy children, and we are 2 healthy parents, and that's not a given, and it's always more difficult if one of this is not the case. And so it's not really that it's our big plan that made it work, but we've also been very, very lucky throughout. Yeah, so 2 minutes, okay. What is my conclusion on my career so far? So yeah, so we've done it this way: career follows family. So we made decision based on what we wanted for our family, and I could not plan a lot of it. A lot of these things just happened, and I'm not a person, so I'm normally a person that really likes to plan and likes to know what happens or so. So it didn't come naturally to just improvise and do it, but it kind of worked out. And one thing is that I'm interested in a lot of things. So actually, it's sometimes really hard for me to decide what to do. But that's also lucky, because then I had more options basically to go for. So I actually was interested in seeing what industry is like, but I also really liked academia. So academia was so far mostly the place where I think I felt I could be, and it worked for me, and people valued what I could contribute. But I most of the time applied for various things, and that was from choosing what to study throughout basically every career change that I did. I might have as well, instead of taking the RSE job, have ended up as a data analyst at a mobile bank that I had also applied for, and actually then didn't go to the second interview because I'd rather take the RSE job. But it's something that at the moment for me is relevant again, when I'm thinking about, okay, do I want to go more the leadership route, or do I want to stay technical, or maybe go back to being even more technical, or so that I actually applied for both. And I think things work out so that I'm going the technical way now. So the question we were asked about, okay, what advice would we give for to our past self? And I must say, I don't know. So I try to think a lot about a lot of clever things to say here, but I'm not sure that I can really give advice. And also, I don't know what this advice might change that I would then not like. But I don't think that she would listen to me anyway, because she's kind of stubborn. So I just leave it at that.
That's brilliant. 4 amazingly different and also amazingly similar perspectives on what it looks like to have a career path as a lie. So thank you very much. Shall we get actually Helen back on screen? Yeah. Can we have Helen's video? Yeah. Hi, Helen.
Hey.
So we've got we've got a lot of questions in the Slido just now. We're getting set up with some microphones. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get through as many of the questions as I can. I may merge some of the questions together because there's quite a few on similar topics. And what I'll do is I'll ask the panelists, I may go to one of you first and then ask if anyone else has additional things to add to it. But I'm going to start off with a question. Firstly, I think it came up in Helen's talk and it's also in some of the others, which is really, can you give advice to people on how to choose what to say no to? Because you obviously have had a lot of opportunities, you've had to turn a lot of things down. How do you say no to something?
I say no to things when they are more of the same. So very often you get, could you do this extra thing, which is the same thing as the thing you've already been doing for 3 years. And that doesn't really help you with, progression. And personally, I'm interested in new things. And so I always want to do things which are new, which means that I've had to kind of build my network to go and look for those things, because nobody ever comes and offers you the thing that you don't know how to do yet. So there's been a piece about that. Doing things without resource is really challenging. And so if you're going to do things without resource, then a negotiation around, okay, so this thing is not resourced, so how are we going to generate, some resource for this, and how can we approach it? Quick and dirty proof of concepts work for things like that. And then there's things which come under the heading of unreasonable request. And the most unreasonable request I get is, please will you come and be the woman on our panel, because the funder told us we needed to bring a woman. And I write back and say, I'm not your token woman. So there are I have personal boundaries. And I guess the way that I discovered what I could say no to was working with my mentors, and great points about mentorship made earlier, I think by Sarah, to, what is it that's about, what are my values? What are my personal values? And how do I implement those in my career path? And so building up members of my team, things I'm personally interested in, calling out bad behavior, things like that. So those are some of the things that drive me.
Thank you, Helen. Any other opinions on what to say now?
Yeah, so one thing I do is I just virtually manage the work that I'm doing. So I kind of have my own Kanban board and I know how much scope I can take within a particular amount of time. So I just, ruthlessly choose the things that interest me and they'll build the skills that I want instead of just saying yes, because then it really dilutes your ability to deliver quality things. So, from that perspective, it's better to just take fewer things and do them really well and do the things that you want to do.
Sarah?
Less about what to say no to, but how to say no. One thing I've stopped doing is explaining why I'm saying no, which I think is going to be very important to everybody who's from an underrepresented group in this meeting today. Like, you just don't have to take the time to explain why you're not going to do something. Like, you have your reasons, great. Don't expend the energy that you're probably already overcommitted on all of the other things you've already said yes to, making that email a paragraph longer than it should be. Just don't.
Do you want to add anything, Marion?
Oh, I'm listening. I still have to learn how to say no.
Brilliant. Moving on to the next question. Coaching and mentoring has come up quite a lot. And one of the questions that we've got asked is, how do you find a coach or mentor? Can you give any advice on how to understand if the person's a good fit? How do you do it to start with? Where do you find your mentors? Sarah, do you want to start?
I've been through a few different ways of finding mentors. So at the minute I've got a coach, and we did that the very traditional way of they offer coaching services and we are paying for it. I went through the Open Life Science program, OLS, and they have an excellent mentee-mentor matching process, which meant that I still have like long-standing coffee meetings with that person. So I didn't have to do a lot of work there, but I'm grateful for the work that the OLS team did in pairing me up with that mentor. And I was also very lucky in that there were other people trying to put teams together in a specific space that brought together people from different backgrounds and different disciplines and different skills, but with the same motivation, much like I think of collaborations workshop. Like, we all care about software sustainability, but from different perspectives. So one way you could do it is by speaking to 70 people at CW23 and figuring out if you have something in interest, if there's something you want to learn from that person. But also it requires a lot of time as well. So you both need to make a commitment in that sense. I think how you ask for mentorship, if you're not going through a formal like contractual agreement, is very important, because it does take a lot of time. And so yeah, making sure you're asking respectfully, got a clear idea of what you want to work on and why that person can help you, and how you intend to make that progress with that person, and graciously accepting the no when it comes without explanation.
Yeah, good points. And I think that's kind of one key thing, is that mentorship comes in many different shapes and forms, but it's always about making sure that both of you know that you're entering a mentoring agreement. Helen, do you have something to add to that as well? How did you find your mentors, and how did you understand what to get coaching for and when?
So mentorship, I don't have much to add on what the point Sarah made. I thought she did a fantastic job. So I'll talk about coaching. So I wish I'd had coaching at every career transition. So I would have loved some after my maternity leave. When Marion was speaking, I was like, oh yes, I should have had coaching after my maternity leave. That would have been a great thing. So every time I've entered a new organization or started collaborating with a new organization, I think the coaching is incredibly useful, because understanding how to make your influence in a new space with an organization with a different set of goals and values, it can be really challenging. And if you have particular career goals in mind. I didn't have career goals in mind, some people do, or if I had particular challenges to overcome, I think those would be the points when I would look for coaching. And coaching can come in lots of different flavors. It can be situational, it can be team-based. I've used some of those things as well. Team-based coaching can be really useful, you know, for example, when you start working with a new team, if people are dysfunctional for lots of reasons. Sometimes, you know, there's lots of challenges that are placed in this kind of blame scenario, which was mentioned earlier. So getting past something that has gone wrong is a really great scenario for team coaching, and allows people to bring their different perspectives. And so I think those are things that I would consider. I have a coach that was recommended by a colleague, and we pay for that. But actually, I hadn't had any work-based training in about 15 years because there just wasn't anything that fitted. And the coaching and the situational piece was by far the best. And yeah, happy to take any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Lamar, Marion, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that the RSE Society also has a mentoring program, which is currently running in its second year. So that might be interesting for some here.
Yeah, one thing that I found useful was basically assessing mentors based on kind of like the networks that they have, because sometimes you can get access to other people and other things that you wouldn't normally if you kind of stay within a bubble, particularly in an organizational bubble. And another useful thing is sometimes finding a mentor who's not doing your job, or, you know, the kind of further step in your career. You can find someone who's doing something completely different, and it just gives you a different perspective and mindset, and that really helps.
That's a really nice segue onto the next question, which is, how did you know, or when did you get the feel that it was time to take the next step and start searching for other positions? I know in some cases this was not a planned thing, but yeah, what were the things that made you think actually it's time for you to start looking for something else? Yeah, Lamar.
Yeah, I think it's that feeling. You get this feeling inside like you could be doing something else. You should try something else. And I think that's usually the catalyst for me. Start to feel a bit uncomfortable, or it starts to feel a bit samey. And then you think, I'd like to try something else. And then there's no harm in looking, because sometimes there are times in my career where I've felt like that, and I've gone looking, and then I thought, no, actually, I'm happy where I am right now, and I stay. So, you know, it's worth the effort to just look around and always just keep yourself, you know, mobilized and able to do that. You don't want to get stuck, because it's really bad for your mental health.
Marion, do you have anything from your slightly less kind of planned experience?
Yeah, I mean, when I was working in industry, actually, I had been thinking about leaving that company earlier on. And I think it was a combination of what happened with colleagues, the colleagues leaving, other colleagues being made redundant, and this feeling where you no longer feel quite comfortable in your workplace, and also not quite valued by your managers. So I decided at that point to at least complete the 2 years, and then that decision was made for me.
Any other comments? Helen, Sarah, do you want to add to that?
I will only say that when the job for I2C was being circulated, it was less about it feels time to leave, and more about, oh, this job description feels like it's been written about me, right? And so it's less about I am no longer belonging where I am, and more like you need to take this opportunity because it was so perfectly Sarah shaped. And but that is an incredible amount of privilege and an incredible amount of luck.
Okay, we're nearing the end of the panel, so we've got two last questions. So penultimate question is, how much strategy did you put into learning skills that you thought would get you your next job? And how much was it more learning skills for other reasons? Sarah, it looks like you want to answer that one first.
So I think because my career because I was so new to research software engineering when I joined, a lot of it was about keeping up to scratch and getting myself up to a specific level to be able to be functional in the team. So yeah, there wasn't a lot of strategy other than like, someone needs to teach me how to Git without messing stuff up. But I will say now that I also think that some of those skills are decided on a team level as well. Like, especially now that I'm in a nonprofit organization, we're talking about what tools are we using that are like at the cutting edge of what's on in the industry. So it's not entirely an individual choice, because when you have when you're in an organization that also cares about your personal development, that will be factored into the choices. Like, I know that I could get another job with the skills I'm learning because we're working at the cutting edge of what is in the industry. So, I think, yeah, if you're in a team and you're making choices about tooling, try and think about how that not just benefits the products you are creating, but also benefits you in the career landscape as well.
So I guess one thing about doing agile software development, strictly using that process, is you spend a lot of time interrogating the process itself. And if you have that mindset with your organization and everything around you in your environment, then you tend to feel like you can see the weak points in the weak areas, and you might see a lot of gaps that you could possibly fill that might be progressive in terms of your career. And it's really nice to, you can target your L&D to fill those gaps and make other people aware. That's one thing you can do. The other thing is, for me, was targeting my training around people. So how do I lead people better? How do I manage people? How do I manage teams? How do I manage myself? All that kind of training was really, really useful.
Helen, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just reflect on what Lamar said. I think there's a piece about influencing people, and there's a general sort of assumption that those soft skills are perhaps not very useful in the tech life, but actually those soft skills are what are going to get you your best job, help you build your network. I've got colleagues that I watch and think, how have you just worked that entire room? I have no idea how you did that. Please, will you tell me? And then you have to find out the way that you can do it for yourself, because you can't be that other person and do it the way they do it. But learning from other people, watching other people, and just saying, how are you doing that? Because I genuinely don't know how you got everyone to agree with you just now. That's the most important thing that I've learned. And it's superseded every single technical thing that I've ever done, because those are all kind of transitory things. They change over time. But the skills about dealing with people and influencing people and understanding other people's motivations, those are the things that have persisted across every project and across every position.
Marion, last word on this subject.
So what for me worked was rarely to learn something that I not need yet. So when I tried that, mostly I ended up not needing it also in the future. So most of the time I learned something successfully was when I actually needed it at that moment and could apply it to something, and that was the most useful learning.
Thank you. So there's still a lot of great questions in the Slido. Perhaps some of you will be able to talk to the speakers on the panel in person to do that. But there is one question that I thought I would throw up to the entire audience, both online and remote. And someone asked a question, is imposter syndrome something that is affecting the majority of people or the minority of people? So if you have ever felt imposter syndrome at some point during your career, do you want to put your hand up on the room or virtually? Okay, so it looks like pretty much everyone has. So I think whoever asked that question, it's the majority of people who suffer from imposter syndrome. So thank you. Please give me, please join me in applause for this wonderful set of panelists for sharing. it is really difficult to come up and talk so openly. There's a lot of comments in the chat and in the questions just saying, thank you so much for showing your resilience, your courage. And yeah, thank you so much for making this a brilliant panel. And we are now going into a break. So well done, everyone.